After a tumultuous 18-month rule, Muhyiddin Yassin has finally admitted defeat and resigned as Malaysia's Prime Minister. But he will remain in a caretaker capacity until his successor is appointed. Speaking to Malaysians in a televised address after an audience with the King at the Palace, Mr. Muhyiddin said he has acted in accordance to the Federal Constitution and tendered his resignation.
Saya telah menghadap ke bawah duri Yang Maha Mulia Sri Paduka Baginda Yang di-Pertuan Agong pada jam 12.30 tengah hari tadi di Istana Negara. Dalam sesi menghadap tersebut, saya telah menyerahkan warkah peletakan jawatan saya sebagai Perdana Menteri dan seluruh jemaah menteri di bawah perkara 434 Perlembagaan Persekutuan disebabkan saya telah kehilangan kepercayaan majoriti ahli Dewan Rakyat. Ini bermakna saya dan seluruh ahli jemaah menteri telah meletakkan jawatan.
Mr. Muhyiddin also said he hopes a new government can be appointed swiftly so that the administration will not be disturbed. He also stressed his confidence that Malaysia will exit this pandemic crisis very soon, reassuring Malaysians that his cabinet has ordered more than enough vaccines, and if the vaccination program goes well, they will get vaccinated by the end of October. The monarch will now determine who can command the majority of the 222-strong legislature where 2 seats are currently vacant. For a closer look, Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teo joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Welcome back to the show, Shannon. For a start, Shannon, what are the powers of a caretaker PM, and will Mr. Muhyiddin's former cabinet ministers be part of this government?
Well, I think we heard what the Prime Minister has to say. The entire cabinet has resigned, they've vacated their offices. But the King has asked the Prime Minister, just Tan Sri Muhyiddin alone, to remain as a caretaker Prime Minister. So it's just himself. I think if you can recall, a bit of deja vu, but 18 months ago, the same thing happened when Tun Dr. Mahathir resigned as Prime Minister. The entire cabinet had to leave their offices, they had to put down their tools, but Mahathir was still allowed to continue as a caretaker Prime Minister. Now, the other question, what can a caretaker Prime Minister do? What powers does he have? Well, if you recall, Mahathir also then launched Malaysia's first COVID-19 stimulus package while in a caretaker capacity. Now, that kind of, it's kind of a gray area because you're not supposed to, by convention, not supposed to put out any new policies if you're in a caretaker position. But back then, that package of stimulus ideas and proposals was already developed by the Finance Ministry. The launch date was already set. He just went out there and announced it. So in the same way, Tan Sri Muhyiddin now can continue existing policies which have already been decided by the government. It just happens that it was his government, so they are also still his policies. Legally, though, there's no such thing as a caretaker or interim prime minister. The constitution is silent on what these terms mean. What we do understand is, of course, this is kind of an understanding between the King and the Prime Minister, saying that you are a placeholder. We need to have a Prime Minister. We can't operate in an environment where there is no government. And so you please stay there until I can appoint a successor. Now, the other time when there is a caretaker Prime Minister in most parliamentary systems is when there is an election. When Parliament is dissolved, until an election can be called, the existing cabinet remains as in a caretaker role. So that kind of tells you where the convention comes from and what is the extent of Tan Sri Muhyiddin's powers right now.
And Shannon, how long can Mr. Muhyiddin stay as caretaker PM before a permanent successor is eventually found?
Again, the law textbooks are silent on this. The King did not mention how long. There is no such thing as a limit to how long a Prime Minister can stay, obviously. So since there is no such term as caretaker Prime Minister in the Constitution, so no one really knows how long. Obviously, the King will have to decide at some point whether it is tenable to continue with just a caretaker government or does he have to make some kind of decision? Obviously, the decision is that you have to appoint a new prime minister, and failing which, you have to dissolve parliament and you have to go for elections. Now, the thing is here that again, if we come back to this convention of an election in Malaysia, an election must be called within 60 days of the dissolution of parliament. So that kind of gives you a rough kind of time frame. What do we mean by how long can a caretaker stay on for? If it were an election situation, it would be 60 days. So you are working around that sort of convention. But in reality, there is nothing to stop Muhyiddin from serving as caretaker prime minister for as long as the king wants.
Right. So still no clear successor, but a few names have been bandied about. We have former Deputy Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob, there's veteran lawmaker Tengku Razali Hamzah, and of course opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim. Shannon, how do you rate their chances becoming the next PM?
Well, I want to make sure I'm on side with whoever becomes the new PM, so I'm afraid to offend anyone here. But if you look at the facts that we have at hand, Anwar Ibrahim has been trying to become Prime Minister for a very long time. Even when his Pakatan Harapan were in government, and then Mahathir resigned, he still couldn't bring the numbers together to support him. He couldn't get a majority. Last September, he said he had a majority, and it didn't turn out to be true. He's consistently repeated this message that he has the numbers, but it just has never happened for him. So many people have doubts. Many people have doubts about whether he can pull through until, I mean, at any point before the next election. After an election, maybe he will have more MPs. But at this point, at this level of support, people think it's very tough for him. Most analysts kind of put him as the dark horse. So it's between these two UMNO names that you mentioned, the current Deputy Prime Minister, the outgoing Deputy Prime Minister Ismail Sabri, and Tengku Razali, who seems to be some kind of compromise candidate. As far as we know, up to now, no agreement has been struck. UMNO is still split, and until obviously until someone can come up with at least 111, the king is not going to be able to solve this predicament all on his own. So it is up to the politicians. The politicians have decided this is not the government that Malaysia should have. So it's up to the politicians to figure out what is the next government, and then Malaysians will decide if you're happy with that government.